listening, don't forget to check out the Professional Amateurs podcast on YouTube. And while you're there, hit like and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Hello everyone, welcome to episode 24 of Professional Amateurs. We are into September now, which means it is really hockey time. No more slow news grinds, no more one signing every 2 weeks that we have to milk an hour to talk about. We're going to do some season previews today. We've got some big news that came down that we're going to discuss in the midst of our season previews. We're going to do between 3 and 5 minutes on each team, talk about their off seasons, and pretty much throw them into a ranking for how we expect them to end up at the end of the year standings. But before we get into that, how are you guys doing?
Doing fantastic.
Doing great.
Oh yeah.
Got your new background set up with your Giroux jersey and your Kachuk jersey.
Yeah, just moved into a new place, got everything set up. School's back underway, so busy times, but some big news helped today.
Some big news that we'll get to in a minute. Jack, you're in a library right now.
Yeah.
Hence the different background.
I don't think they'd be happy if I put stuff up on the walls.
Fair. That'd be fair. That's fair. Maybe no screaming then, since we're in a library. No promises, because it is a hockey podcast. It gets pretty exciting. All right, let's get right into the season previews. We'll start with the Atlantic Division, especially after all the news. We were going to start West, but we made a game time decision with all the news that's come down in the Atlantic over the last few days. We'll start with Detroit. They had one of the more eventful off seasons out of any team in the NHL. They bring in Ville Husso, David Perron, Andrew Kopp, Dominique Kubalik, and Ben Sherratt, all as unrestricted free agents. And out the door, they see Thomas Greiss and Mark Stahl go. They bring in about $20 million in salary, maybe even a little more than that. And a lot of these guys are impact players that are probably going to give Detroit a nice little bump. How do you guys feel about Detroit's offseason?
Yeah, I personally think it was definitely a step in the right direction for them. I think we're going to see them much improved. Personally, I think part of their biggest problem last year was just depth. Like, sure, they have those young guys who are able to carry the load at the top of the lineup, but after that, it was a little bleak. So they've definitely addressed that, and I think it's going to significantly help them for sure. But I still don't know if I see them taking that big step that some other teams might.
Mainly because there's going to be a few other teams that are going to be looking to take a big step, especially in the Atlantic. It's going to be a wild division. Jack, what do you think about Detroit's offseason?
It was a pretty weird one to see them go that aggressive. I was a bit surprised by it. I really don't like the Ben Sherratt contract. That's going to age badly, I think.
Yeah.
I think it all comes down to Ville Husso and net. They really kind of solidified their middle six forwards, but they need their young kids to become stars because they didn't add any stars.
Their top six definitely it definitely improved. Like, you bring David Perron into a top six winger. Andrew Kopp probably slides in on the second line at center. Dominique Kubalik, he's a scoring winger, probably in the middle or bottom six. But a lot of like NHL caliber additions to this team that has been rebuilding for a long time.
And they were very good adds. It really solidified the forward group, but really, like, for a game changer, it's still going to be Lucas Raymond.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So it's really kind of relying still on that youth to continue developing. Husso to be able to handle the workload is going to be the ultimate kind of what if.
As it sits on Cap Friendly right now, and Cap Friendly never fully has the lines right, but like, this is how their lines look right now. It's Tyler Bertuzzi, Dylan Larkin, Lucas Raymond on the top line, Vrana, Kopp, Perron on the second line, very good second line, Kubalik, Suter, and Zadina on the third line. I think that has great potential too. And then the fourth line is still a little bit up there with Ernie, Rasmussen, and Sundqvist, but it's much better than last year.
Yeah, I think that'll be a good forward group.
Do either of you know if Bertuzzi rescinded his trade request? Didn't he want out?
Oh, that must have been a long time ago if it was.
I
'Cause
don't know. Maybe
I
I'm
would
making
think
that
I
up.
would think that did happen. He's also unvaxxed, isn't he? I don't know if that's going to affect him this year with the rules being different.
Yeah, I'm
But
not sure.
I honestly don't remember a trade request from Bertuzzi, but
I don't know. I could be misremembering.
yeah, it'll be interesting too because like they brought in Nedeljkovic last year, in a very similar situation to what Husso was in. Although Husso was UFA, but they traded, I think it was a third rounder just for his rights to sign him before free agency started. And if I'm not mistaken, they acquired Nedeljkovic as a restricted free agent, also for a third round pick. So it'll be interesting to see that tandem, considering they were both signed in very similar ways. So yeah, Husso and Perron on matching 4.75 AAVs. Husso for 3 years, Perron for 2. Kopp on 5 times 5.6, Kubalik 2 times 2.5, and Sherratt with a whopping 4 years at 4 3/4. So we got another 30 seconds on Detroit. Where do we have them ranking in the Atlantic Division and / the Eastern Conference? Ryan.
Okay. I have them 5th in the Atlantic.
Okay.
I haven't looked at the bigger picture yet in the East, but in my head that has them slightly out of the playoffs, and I see that's how this is going to play out. But I do think they're going to be incredibly improved from last year. Like, this is going to be a competitive team till the end of the season, I think, but I don't see them in the playoffs yet. So 5th in the Atlantic for me.
Okay. Jack?
It's going to be a real boring podcast if we agree on everything. I also have them 5th in the Atlantic, 12th in the conference, missing the playoffs.
I've got Detroit 7th in the Atlantic. I didn't do conference, so we'll just stick with 7th. I've got them. Actually, I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to say who I have them behind, but I've got Detroit 7th. I like their moves, but I think other teams are better built. Other teams that were in a similar rebuilding state last year are better built / made more impactful additions, I think. All right, moving on. We'll hop over to Boston. We'll go to the Bruins. Bit of a quiet offseason for the Bruins. They bring in Pavel Zacha. He's got 1 year at 3.5. I think they gave him that contract. I think they acquired his rights in exchange for Eric Haula. Or no, yeah, I think it was Eric Haula for Pavel Zacha. And they also brought back David Krejci, who spent a year in the Czechia League. He signed a 1 year, $1 million contract. They lost Eric Haula, as I just mentioned, and Curtis Lazar, and they brought back Patrice Bergeron on a 1 year contract worth $2.5 million, which means that their top 2 centers are going to be making a combined $3.5 million, depending on how you feel about Charlie Coyle, who I believe will be their third line center to start the year. Start with Jack. How do we feel about Boston's offseason?
Well, for the 2 contracts there for Bergeron and Krejci, I thought it was pretty interesting the way they're set up with the bonuses to cheat the cap. I think it's a bit of a loophole, but I like seeing those little loopholes and kind of how teams work around stuff like that. Ultimately, they didn't really get better, and their prospect pool is near, if not the bottom of the league. And you combine that with the injuries they have to start the year, it's going to be a rough one.
Ryan?
Yeah, I agree. I said in a past pod that I 100% think they're going to miss the playoffs, and I'll get to that in a sec when we get to predictions. But I like their offseason was just incredibly mediocre, and with the significant pieces they're missing, like Jack said, in Marchand, McAvoy, Grzelcyk, it's going to be ridiculously tough for them to get into the playoffs, in my mind. So I see them as a very meh team.
Yeah, when I was looking at their team, I was thinking, like, why were we so down on Boston coming to this year? Especially, I forget which podcast. It was either last episode or the one before. We talked about how Boston's really in for one this year. And I couldn't really remember why, because their team looked the exact same as last year and the year before and year before. And I remembered all the injuries, and their defense core is absolutely devastated by injury. Is it Marchand who's out too? Bergeron will be 38. Krejci just played a year in Europe, so he might have lost a step or two. He's also getting up there in age. I think he'll be 36. Yeah. Pasternak's on a walk year, so who knows how he'll play. could go off, could be the opposite. It'll be really interesting.
Yeah, in my mind, they didn't really get any better.
No,
They got older, and they're hurt, very hurt.
Yeah.
Like, so that's just not a good recipe.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't lose much, but they didn't bring anything in. So, other than retaining some players, I guess their big offseason acquisition was David Krejci. And given his age, that's not the most ideal thing, especially in this division. Jack, where do you have Boston ranking?
This is embarrassing. I already have to correct something. Detroit's 6th, Boston is 5th in the Atlantic.
Okay.
I can't count. Counting is hard, but I also have Boston missing the playoffs.
Okay. So to summarize, you have Detroit 6th, Boston 5th, but both missing the playoffs. Okay.
Correct.
Ryan?
Okay, I'm glad we have a little bit of variation here now, because if you also had Boston 6th, this would have been tough. But I have Boston 6th. I see them taking more of a step back, and with, again, the teams that have gotten much better in this division, I see them falling quite a bit. I think they're going to be in a lottery position.
So there's the timer for Boston. So you said 6?
Yeah, 6th.
Okay, I've also got the Bruins coming 6th and missing the playoffs. I think they'll be in a situation where they're like maybe 7th or just a really bad 6th place in the division come middle of November and December, and then they'll get their guys back and make a run. But I think they'll be a little bit too far gone. Not unlike what the Islanders did last year, where they had their COVID stretch. They started the season with 13 games on the road and then finally got healthy and got back playing at home, but they were too far gone to be able to catch up. So I've also got Boston 6th. All right, next up, we've got the Ottawa Senators. A lot of people's off-season champions. They bring in Alex DeBrincat. They bring in Claude Giroux. They bring in Cam Talbot. They extend Josh Norris. They extend Matthew Joseph. And they extend Tim Stützle. 8 years, 7.95 for Norris, 4 times 2.95 for Joseph. And just breaking in the last hour, Timmy Stützle, 8 years, 8.35. As for their losses, nothing too significant, but definitely some roster players. Matt Murray was sent out in a trade. Connor Brown to Washington. Michael Del Zotto, Philip Gustafson, and Chris Tierney are all of the notable subtractions made by the Ottawa Senators. Ryan, how do you feel about your Ottawa Senators 2022 offseason?
I feel incredible. It's the summer of Dorion, and they should just give him the GM of the year now. No, I'm joking, but I am ridiculously optimistic about this team compared to the last 5 years. And that's just so unbelievable to say, given the turnaround in the last couple months, and we keep saying it, but it's actually crazy being a fan of this team. It's just, I see them definitely taking a huge step. Alex DeBrincat and Josh Norris are going to be absolutely lethal up front. And if they put them on the same power play, it's over for other teams. And we're going to see a very improved Ottawa Senators team.
Jack?
I agree. It was, I don't know, maybe it's a bit of a recency bias, but I would say it's probably the craziest offseason since I've been following hockey closely for a single team to really just completely rehaul it the way they did and still be bringing up youth through their own system. They're still a loaded prospect pool. So
another
definitely
name,
a huge step forward.
Another name I could have included on the additions chart was Jake Sanderson. He'll make his debut this year, likely in a top 4 role.
Another not addition, but addition is Shane Pinto too. He missed almost the entire year, and he's going to be in there solidifying that 3C role. So I think he's going to make some noise for Rookie of the Year potentially too.
Pinto missed all but 5 games last year.
Yeah.
And so he's technically still a rookie again.
Yeah, he's still eligible for the Calder.
And he switched to number 57, right? Back to his training camp number because DeBrincat took 12.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It'll be a fun season. the ticket sales have been insane. I've heard. I went and got seasons tickets for this year, so I'm very excited about the Sens this year. Probably the most exciting team I've like been alive for. That's maybe not true but I was 7 years old when they went to the Cup final. So this is the most like bit excited I've been going into a season for a specific team. Like I think it's gonna be a really fun NHL season. I don't know.
And just to play devil's advocate for 1 second, though, is they still have not really touched the decor, and that's a major question going into the season. If Nikita Zaitsev is in the top 6 on opening night, I think the fans might actually riot. Like, no matter what the offseason has looked like, I think if that happens, we're going to see some people very upset, including myself.
Yeah, the decor is so I'm about to give my ranking. I have Ottawa 4th in the division. Up until no, not up until I was really stuck between, like, I wanted to put Boston 4th, but then remembered the injuries, and I wanted to put Ottawa 4th, but then remembered the decor, and I kind of have a team stuck at 5 that I didn't want to move, so I figured it was Ottawa or Boston for 4th, and I went Ottawa because I just think they're going to score so many freaking goals, and Boston's injuries are just going to be so devastating for them. But the decor definitely concerns me. I could definitely see Ottawa still missing the playoffs despite finishing 4th in division. I could see 5 playoff teams in the Metro. I didn't do a playoff prediction. I did a division prediction. So maybe just off the top of my head, I've got Ottawa 4th in the division, 9th in the conference. But what do you guys have? Ryan, what do you have?
Yeah, I also have them 4th in the division. I do completely agree with all the concerns about the defense, but I think with Anton Forsberg hopefully solidifying himself here after an incredible year out of kind of nowhere from a waiver pickup, and then obviously the addition of Cam Talbot as well. I think the goaltender tandem is very good considering what's around the league. So I think that'll alleviate some of the pressure off the D, and I think it's going to be enough for them just to squeak in. I think they get a wild card spot.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got them 4th in the division as well. I've got them 8th, taking that final wild card spot, and I think honestly, I don't disagree that their decor needs some work, but I don't see it as an issue right now. Like, I have them a playoff team with this current decor. If they add another top 4 D, I would probably put them into the top 3 in the Atlantic.
Yeah, I completely agree there. Like, I have them topping my team at 3 for sure if they add a top 4 defenseman.
Okay. So let's see if that team is who you have at this next team is who you have at 3. On to the Florida Panthers. Probably the biggest trade we've all been alive for, or maybe not the biggest trade, but the most, I don't know, what's a good hyperbole? Impactful trade that we've all been alive for. They bring in Matthew Tkachuk in a sign and trade and sign him he gets 8 years, $9.5 million per year. And then a couple of lower level additions. They brought in Rudolph Balcers and Mark Stahl, both on 1-year minimum deals. But out the door, they see Jonathan Huberdeau, Mackenzie Weegar, Mason Marchment, Claude Giroux, Nola Chari, Marcus Nudivara, and Ben Sherratt. 7 NHL players out the door, 4 or 5 of them legitimate impact players. Jack, what are your thoughts on Florida's offseason as a whole?
It's amazing that they did what they did. I think they're worse off. One subtraction he didn't mention is they changed the coach as well after he was a Jack Adams finalist.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, it's Paul Maurice they brought in.
Yeah.
Who I love as a coach, but I really don't think it's a fit. And I think it's kind of make or break time for Spencer Knight as well, and that Bobrovsky contract's in the way. So they're almost entering purgatory for me. They're just kind of stuck.
Ryan, how do you feel about Florida?
Yeah, I see it as almost as it kind of is an all-in year. It just like their forwards are still pretty nice. Their defense is extremely questionable. And like you said, Bobrovsky is just dead weight at this point. So I'm not in love with their roster at all. But I know what the top of the lineup is capable of. It'll be interesting to see how any dynamics change with Kachuk coming in, like instead of Huberdeau being there. But I still think they're going to be a very interesting team to watch this year. But I don't know. I'm definitely not as high on them as I was last year for sure.
I hate that they lost Mackenzie Weegar. Like from a Florida perspective, losing Weegar, like it feels like he was treated almost as a throw-in in that trade.
Yeah, it's disgusting. And he's like one of the top like two-way defensemen in the game.
Yeah. He's like a right-handed Devin Taves, like in that similar role where he's not the headline maker on his team on D. It was Ekblad, but like there's a legitimate case to be made that he's the most important defenseman to that team, and they included him with Huberdeau for Matthew Tkachuk, who's a 100-point power forward, 24 years old, but it's just such a massive subtraction from your team, and when the depth beyond that Ekblad Weegar pairing was so slim to begin with,
and not to talk about like not even to talk about not having a first round pick for like 4 straight years now.
Yeah,
like they've completely decimated their futures.
Yeah, but they also might be making the bet by removing from their team. They might be making the bet that a guy like Anton Lundell is going to break out.
Yeah,
because he'll move up in the lineup. They've still got Sam Reinhart. They've still got Sam Bennett. But again, the question comes into play. Like, I'm pretty sure Sam Bennett was playing with Huberdeau. So do his numbers take a step back? Or like even because Tkachuk doesn't play in the same role as Huberdeau. Huberdeau is a passer. Tkachuk mucks it up in the corners and scores in front of the net. So the dynamic of the team is going to take a huge switch.
Mm-hmm. Like I wonder if Lundell passes Bennett this year for the 2C role.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see for sure. Jack, where do you have Florida coming in the Eastern Conference and in the Atlantic Division?
They are my third in the Atlantic. And yeah, I think Ottawa's right there knocking on the door. I don't think Florida's in trouble, but they're right on the edge of being concerning.
Mm-hmm.
With, as Ryan mentioned, the no draft picks, like there's nothing coming to help them right now. It's like this team or they're done.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many fans they got out there, but if they're out there, I'd be pretty concerned.
Ryan, how are you feeling about the Panthers?
Yeah, maybe this will end up being a boring list after all, but I also have them third. So your segue was pretty good there. It's just nothing inspires me about this team. I don't know. Obviously I know the talent is there, and I do fully see them in the playoffs in that third spot, but I don't know. Like it would not shock me if they do slip out too.
Right.
It really wouldn't.
I've got Florida coming second in the Atlantic. I don't love the moves they made. Like I love bringing in Tkachuk long term, but for a team inside its Stanley Cup window, they gave up too much in the immediate present. However, they were so far and away the best team in the East during the regular season last year that I think they'll be able to overcome that. I think they get leapfrogged at the top of the division, but I still think that they're a top 2 team in that division, top 3 or 4 team in the East. Just because they've still got that same core, like Barkov, Tkachuk, Ekblad is one of, like, for my money, one of the probably top 5 trios in the NHL off the top of my head. I think they're still gonna be a really good team, just not President's Trophy first place caliber like they were last year. All right, next up we have the Montreal Canadiens. After a Stanley Cup final appearance, they ended up finishing last in the NHL last year, earning the first overall pick, bringing in Juraj Slafkovsky. In addition to their top prospect, they bring in Michael Matheson in a trade with Pittsburgh, Evgeny Dadonov in a trade with Vegas. They bring in Kirby Dach from Chicago, Sean Monahan from the Flames, and out the door they see Jeff Petrie going to Pittsburgh, Alexander Romanov, and I included Shea Weber's name. However, he wasn't really going to be playing with the team anyway. We just lost Ryan, so we'll give him a minute to figure it out while Jack and I continue with the Montreal Canadiens. And it should be mentioned that Carey Price, it recently came out that he's going to be placed on LTIR to start the season. There's a chance he misses the season again, which is really tough news for hockey fans in general, and especially Montreal fans. And I throw it over to a Montreal fan himself. Jack, how do you feel about the Habs offseason?
Finally, I get picked first. It only took Ryan's laptop dying. I'm honored by this selection. It's going to be another tough season. I think any realistic Montreal fan recognizes that this wasn't a one-off. This isn't a huge bounce back year. This isn't sneaking into the playoffs and going on a run again. It's going to be another rebuild year. With that said, that contract coming out today, like they're doing good stuff. I like the way the team's going.
How do you think they line up down the middle to start the year?
If Monahan's healthy, he's the 2C behind Suzuki, with Dak being the third, I think.
And then like Dvorak, fourth line?
Yeah, by default, Jake Evans would be in the mix there.
Yeah.
Dvorak has no value right now. He's a dead weight. I
They
read
traded
that
a first for him last year, didn't they?
first and a third, I believe.
Yeah.
Because we got a first and a third for Kotkaniemi for the offer sheet, and
Right.
flipped it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So one final fuck you from Bergevin.
I would just like all the listeners to know that the reason Ryan left the meeting, the pod, is because his laptop died. I think that's very funny. I think it's absolutely
Bush League.
It's Bush League that he didn't have his laptop plugged in. He's in his room recording the podcast and his laptop died. For anybody wondering. So we'll have to give him crap for that when he gets back on. But yeah, it was an interesting offseason for Montreal. They made a couple of moves. Like, you can kind of tell they're taking on bad money, but they're not necessarily bad players. Like, bringing in Evgeny Dodonov, like, that's going to help the team win games. Like, he's a good player still. And
I think like him and a couple others are prime targets to be flipped at the deadline too.
Yeah, for sure. And the Michael Matheson trade, that was a weird one. That one was, they sent out Petrie, they bring in Matheson. Like, Matheson probably doesn't have as high of a ceiling in terms of production for this upcoming season as Petrie, but it's a lower cap hit, but it's longer term. It's one of those weird ones where, like, it's hard to understand the motivations for each team.
It's an interesting one. I think Petrie was kind of done in Montreal. He was ready to be out. I think he like requested a trade once or twice. So I think it was just time to get him out. If I'm not mistaken, Mike Matheson was player agent, was Kent Hughes. So that's kind of the GM bringing in his guy, so to speak. And it does fit the timeline better, even though he's probably not going to be anything more than the fourth defenseman when this team's ready to contend. It does fit the age group better in the timeline.
Yeah. So we only have 9 minutes left. So Ryan, I'm going to skip you for Montreal, but we'll each give our predictions for where we think Montreal ends up in the division. Jack, where do you have them in the Atlantic?
Dead last.
Okay, Ryan.
Yeah, also dead last.
I also have them 8th. So it's a consensus second consecutive last place finish for the Canadiens in the Atlantic.
I have them dead last in the conference too.
That makes sense. All right. So again, we only have 9 minutes left, so we're gonna have to do a little bit quick for these last 3 teams. We'll hop over to Buffalo. Not much going on this offseason for them, just pretty much maintaining the status quo. They extend Tage Thompson. They bring in Eric Comrie and Ilya Lyubushkin. They don't see anybody notable leave. Colin Miller, I guess, if you want to split hairs. But not a lot of turnover for Buffalo, which is probably a good thing. They need to establish a culture, and it seems like they really did that last year after the Eichel trade. Jack, how do you feel about Buffalo going into this season?
I think you summed it up perfectly there. Like, they didn't go the Detroit model and go anything crazy, but I don't think that's a bad thing. They're just going to continue building. The Tage Thompson deal is a bit of a risk, see how that pays off. I love where the team's headed. And as you said, the culture, the vibes, they're just different since Eichel was gone. It's pretty awesome to see kind of the Buffalo fan base, which I would say is probably one of the top American fan bases in hockey. It's pretty awesome to see them bumping again.
Buffalo is one of the top fan bases in sports. Like, Bills fans are
for
crazy
sure.
too.
The Bills are nuts.
Yeah. Ryan, how do you feel about Tage Thompson's 7x7.1?
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a risk, but I seem a little bit more optimistic about it than most people. Um, I think when you have a guy explode like that in 1 year, it's super scary. But you also look at it, it's like he's still pretty young on a team that's only going to get better, and he just shifted to center. Like he's gonna be an impact player on this team for years to come. So, and with the cap going up, I think it's going to be a semi-reasonable contract, even if he ends up at most like a 25, 50 point, 55 point guy.
The reason I like the contract for Thompson and Buffalo, it's probably a little bit more per year than I would have liked to give him. However, his breakout season coincided with his position change,
Yeah.
which I think is very promising. If he'd have gone from just being a scrub winger to now being a stud winger, but since he moved to center is when he had his breakout year, which is why I think it's a little bit more inspiring that he's going to be able to maintain that.
And it's also, if I can just add one more thing, it's stabilizing when a young team that's trying to develop together and bring up guys who the farm together. Yeah. When you get the first one to sign long term, there's the same thing when got Chabot. Yeah. All of a sudden, it wasn't, holy shit, we're a junior program for the teams that'll pay these guys.
Yeah,
we're not just developing talent, we're keeping talent.
Yeah, we saw that in Ottawa with the Chabot contract. Everything kind of fell in line after that, and especially with the Tkachuk contract. So big contracts like that for young players, as much as it is a risk, it's massive for the organization.
Where do you have Buffalo ending up?
I have them 7th. Yeah.
Okay.
Me too.
I've got them 5th. I really like the momentum they built at the end of last year, especially after the Eichel trade. Well, that's when they started building momentum. Alex Tuch's a stud. I think he should be their next captain. Unless they already named a captain. I can't remember if Buffalo has one or not. But I really like their core. Owen Power is going to be a monster. Mm-hmm. And I think Darlene breaks out. Cousins going to be good. I really like Buffalo's team, and their jerseys are cool. So I think I've got them 5th.
Yeah, I really debated putting them over Boston. Like I really think that could happen 100%.
Yeah. Okay, just for jokes, we're gonna rip through the Leafs because we don't have a lot of time. They bring in Matt Murray, Ilya Samsonov, Kalle Järnkrok, and Nick Aube-Kubel, Stanley Cup champion Nick Aube-Kubel. And out the door, they see Jack Campbell, Ilya Mikheyev, Peter Mrazek, Andre Kasha, Colin Blackwell, and Ilya Lyubushkin, as well as extending Mark Giordano to a 2-year deal worth $800K a year, which is crazy. Timothy Liljegren, 2 years times 1.4, and they brought back Pierre Engvall on a 1-year deal. Where do you guys have Toronto ending up in the Atlantic Division?
I've got them taking the division. The only question mark left for them is goalies. I like both the goalies they're taking flyers on. I think either or both of them could break out this year. Mm-hmm. And I think this is Kyle Dubas' last chance. So even if it goes bad for the first month, he's going to spend on a goalie. I don't see that being a long-term issue. He has no choice, or it's going to cost him his job.
Ryan, how do you feel about Toronto?
Yeah, I also have them at the top. I think they're still a ridiculously talented team up front. Like, although their depth might not be the best, they find a way to make it work. You always do with a 60-goal scorer. So their defense, I think, is fine. It's gotten better in years. So I think that's good. The goalies, Matt Murray scares me being a Sens fan. Just knowing how injury prone he's been and how that takes a toll on players, it scares me a lot. Samsonov, I have a little bit more faith there. So I think they'll be just fine. I think they're going to finish at the top of the division for sure.
I've got Toronto first as well. I think they're going to have their best regular season of the Matthews era. I think this is the year they went around. Yeah, I don't know. I just like their team. I like the continuity they have. Their core is back, and it's one of the best cores in the NHL. The depth is a little sketchy, but everyone said that last year too. I like the Järnkrok signing. I like Samsonov on a 1-year deal. I don't like Matt Murray coming in for 2 years at almost $5 million. I think you might as well have just given that to Campbell. But I mean, beggars can't be choosers, and when you're cap strapped and you have no goalies, you got to make do. And I don't mind what Toronto did given their circumstances.
Mm-hmm. And given that we have kind of alluded that we think Toronto will be at the top and Ottawa might be in a wild card. That would
First
be
round
fun.
series, pretty sick.
That would be fun.
All right, we got 2 minutes to do Tampa, the back-to-back Eastern Conference champions. They bring in Ian Cole, Vlad Nemestikov, Hayden Fleury, and Philip Myers. Out the door, they see Andre Palat, Ryan McDonough, and Jan Ruda signing elsewhere in free agency. McDonough was through trade to Nashville. And Tampa gets long-term extensions done with Mikhail Sergachev, 8 times 8.5. Anthony Cirelli, 8 times 6.25. Eric Chernak, 8 times 5.2. And Nick Paul, 7 times 3.15. How do we feel? Very quick. Go, Jack.
They're the Tampa Bay Lightning. Like, I think they're a little bit worse on paper this year, but they're the Lightning of this era. I have no fear in them taking a huge step back. Like, I'm very confident. I have them just behind Toronto, taking second in the Atlantic, but they've been to 3 straight finals for a reason. They know what they're doing.
Ryan, how do you feel?
Yeah, I'm not going to make the same mistake of disrespecting them. Like, I feel like I've done all of the last year. I chose them to lose in the first round. They very much proved me wrong, and I thought they were going to take a huge step back last year, which is how much hockey they've played. But I'm going to put them at second in the division.
I've got them third. I think Florida and Toronto are going to remain high-flying offenses in the regular season, but I think Tampa is they're just going to continue under the impression that once they get in, they can muck it up from there. And I think their additions reflect that. I like the Ian Cole ad. I think he's a stabilizing presence back there, especially with McDonough out the door. And the extensions are sick. That's got to be a huge morale boost in the room. So I've got Tampa third, making the playoffs, obviously, and a first-round matchup between the Battle of Florida after Tampa took it last time, the past 2 times, actually. So without further ado, that is the Atlantic Division. That's it for this episode, and we're going to hop over and do the Metro Division now.